Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Bid Breakfast Q&A. Good morning, Rob.
Good morning.
As you will all be aware, there are three faces on the screen. There are two of us on the left-hand side. Chris should be fresh back from holidays, so hopefully will be joining us at some point soon to give his view for any procurement-related questions. But in the meantime, it's just Rob and I today. All the questions are essentially bids-related rather than procurement. So, shall we get on to the first question, Rob?
Indeed, let's do it.
Okay. So first question, do you use and project management tools? Someone obviously didn't proofread that before they sent it in. Do you use project management tools when managing a bid?
Well, I don't manage bids generally, but when I did, I used the trusty Microsoft Excel. Because when I was managing bids, all these fancy tools weren't necessarily around. I know there's a lot out there now. I know some teams swear by things like Monday.com. Oh, by the way, no one's paying me from Monday.com to say that, but if they want to, always open. But there's lots of tools out there at the moment, and particularly with AI. I think there's probably even more out there now that could do certain things. I would, though, say that bid-specific management tools or project management tools that fit into what bids are don't necessarily exist on a wider scale. You're often having to shoehorn in a bid process to what might be a traditional project management process. So it's not perfect.
For once, Rob, I disagree with you.
There you go. Well, that's why I'm not a bid manager, and that's why you are.
I don't see any difference in a bid and a project. And for many years, I have seen bids as projects. So I think the key thing you mentioned there is the bid process, and that is essentially a process that can then be translated into a project management tool. I think the key thing here is sometimes a full-on project management tool can be too clunky for a bid. And there's a real balance here. Some of the big project management tools are or take a lot of management in terms of time and resource, and they're great for big projects that are complex with multiple stakeholders. Sometimes when you've got a bid that needs to be quite fast and reactive, that they don't always help. And I think that's the rationale for using a project management tool, is that it should bring some benefit to your process. So, and I've seen this before and actually done it myself, where using the bid management tool takes more time than all of the other things that you're doing. So it's kind of a false economy. So I think project is fine. If it's, again, it needs to be a fairly big bid. Or the other scenario where I think this is useful is if you are fairly new to bid management and you just need a bit of structure around you, just to give you some confidence that you're doing the right things and you've hit all the right milestones, that you know when the reviews are, you know when the drafting deadlines are, you know when you've got to get things signed off. So I think there is some value. And I think, whenever we start a bid, we always map out the timeline, which essentially is the project plan. But that's the first thing that I think people need to do. So I think for simple projects, just having a timeline and checklist in Excel is fine. Word, it even works in Word, but it would come back to it's got to add some benefit and it can't be too time heavy, because then it stops you from doing all the other things you need to do as a bid manager.
I don't think you want. I've worked in big organisations where this can be the case, where the project management element becomes an industry unto itself. The process of filling in forms, etc., and it can really distract from the actual point of what the process should be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we've talked about this a lot when we've talked about what bid managers and bid directors do. A lot of the time, that bid management, bid director role is about communicating with stakeholders and making things happen, unblocking blockages, and all those sorts of things that help you get to a really high quality bid. Too much time on process and admin, and again, where it doesn't add benefit, is a false economy. If you've got a particularly complex project, or you've got a difficult group of stakeholders that need to be held to account, then this is a great way to do it. Particularly if you've got sign up from further up the chain of command, it's a great way to be able to provide that accountability. So I would say for probably 80% of our bids, we either use Word or Excel. The other thing is that we've been doing this for a lot of years and we kind of know what we're doing, I hope. Most of the time. So I think it kind of comes naturally and we just fall into the rhythm of it's a bid and we know exactly what to do. For the more complex bids, and those are either very technically difficult spec, multiple stakeholders across different organizations, or high value projects that maybe are a negotiated process, those are things where probably some sort of formal bid, project management process could help. It might not always, but I would say those are probably the three areas that I would certainly start to think about for a formal project management process. Right. Have I convinced you, Rob, or are you still in?
No, I think we're just coming at it from different angles. That's all. It's just I think it's those big, massive, clunky project management tools, which I think I was mainly referring to, that don't. You can use it, but it's pointless, frankly. I think. So,
yeah, and I think that comes back to Prince 2 was quite a good thing to have years ago, but again, Prince 2 is quite big and it's really helpful for big complex IT projects, but it isn't always great for.
It goes back to us talking about methodology and for anything, and it's good to have a base methodology, especially if you're starting from scratch. But you got to make it work for you and the organisation you're working for.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's just sort of triggered a thought, which was we often talk about discipline in a bid process, and actually project management is a nice discipline to have. So again, I think if you understand what project management is, what tools are available, what the methodologies are, you can almost develop your own that fits in with the discipline of your organisation. In fact, maybe there's a gap in the market here, Rob. Although, having said that, I mean, one of the reasons that we work with Altura is because of their bid management processes. So, there are things out there at the moment that are already starting to deal with things like this that are bid specific. So, I think there are definitely newer bid specific project management tools available to people. Right. It feels like we've spent a lot of time on that, but it was, I think,
it's an interesting topic.
Yeah. It's not often that I get to speak that long when you're around.
I know. Oh, I think it's the other way around. Well, this will mainly be you as well, but PIN, for a start, PIN stands for Prior Information Notice. Now, you don't necessarily see as many of these around as you used to. That they can often be called something else on the various portals: market engagement, future opportunity notice. All of them essentially mean this is notice that something is coming out to procurement in the future. Doesn't necessarily mean the process has formally started. It's prior notice to get your pre-bid work underway. And in certain cases, it allows you to provide some direction or feedback into the process for when the bid comes out. That might be feedback on the specification, or letting the commissioners know that you exist and what you do. And in some cases, that can lead to the bid being more tailored to what you do. So they are worth doing, worth looking at. In fact, they're probably really important to look at, actually, especially as I pass over to Matt for his evangelizing about pre-bid work.
Well, for the first time this week, I saw a notice that was a pin that very clearly said the process has now started. And that pricked my attention because, that is very, very unusual that they're that clear. And there's often been confusion about if a pin's come out, has the procurement process started? But they were extremely clear in this one. The process had started. I think, other than explaining what PIN stands for, PIN is the kind of silver bullet that you're looking for as a bidder. That gives you the heads up that something's coming down the line. As Rob said, there's plenty of time to prepare. And if you want to know more about pre-bid work, then I would say go back to one of our previous webinars, because it's an hour minimum in itself, just to understand what you need to do in terms of pre-bid work. But I think the main reason for pre-bid work is to strengthen your position against your competitors. Anything else is essentially pointless. You're wasting your time. The whole point of pre-bid work is to improve your chances of winning. And if you're not doing that, if you're just having general chit chats with people and it's not actually helping the bid strategy, win themes, commercial position, partnership arrangements, forget it. You are not helping yourself at all. So for me, any pin should be on the pipeline that's relevant. It should then be qualified. And if it's qualified as a, yes, we're going to bid for this, then you should have a pre-bid strategy or checklist, which, depending on how big the bid is in your organization, of things to do. So that might be talking to the procurement team, talking to the customer, talking to the end user, developing your delivery model, developing your product list, developing some outline commercials, any partnership arrangements, so that when the bid lands, rather than having to start from scratch, you are looking at probably 60 to 80% of your bid that's already there and just needs to be adjusted. So don't underestimate the importance of a pin. A lot of people will sit there and think, oh, that's coming in 3 or 6 months, we'll forget about that for now. And that is the worst thing to do.
Get on it, get to work. Even things like, if there's a rough timetable, get your bid team in play. Figure out who they're going to be, line them up, get them, if they're not au fait with the potential content, get them onto that. There's so much you can do in that time, rather than, the bid came out yesterday and you've got 3 or 4 weeks to do all that.
And I think, Rob, this just reminded me of a situation we were in a while ago where a bid got delayed by 3 or 4 weeks, I think. And the immediate response from the client we were working with was, right, we'll see you in 3 or 4 weeks, lads, and come back and talk to us then. My response was, what are you doing? This is essentially an extension to the bid, which in 4 weeks' time you'll be screaming for. You think about how many bids you've worked on where you get to the last week and think, oh, God, I wish we had another week on this or another 3 days. A pin is essentially a front-end extension, and quite often it's 3, 6, 9 months of extension. So why would you not use that time? If someone gave you a 3-month extension in the bid process, you'd be over the moon. And I think that's the kind of shift in thinking that some people might need to use, is that a pin is essentially an extension of the bid window. Right. I feel like I've got quite emotional about that, Rob. I've drained myself now.
Well, it's a very important topic. Carry on.
Another huge one. When does 2P apply, and how do I account for it in a bid?
The first thing I would do is give some kind of almost official advice. Is make sure you have a HR expert or a HR legal expert on tap to go through this if you're unsure or if you haven't gone through it before, because 2P can be very complex and sometimes ambiguous, and commissioners can be very unhelpful when it comes to this. Not all of them, but some of them essentially just go, well, it's your problem to figure out, and you'll have to account for it in your bid. Often you need to, the main thing is with 2P, you need to account for it in the finances. It's a huge burden, and you need to understand, and this is where you need to understand where it counts, because I'm going to stop there. Matt, if you were telling somebody what 2P is for the first time, how would you describe it without me jumping about 10 steps ahead?
Well, I think in its simplest form, it is the transfer of staff from one organisation to another. Then when you start to unpick what that means, the next level down would be the transfer of eligible staff from one organisation to another. And that's really where the tricky bit comes in 2P, is who is eligible. And then you've got all the detail around the terms and conditions and everything else that applies. But essentially, it is a transfer of staff. So, I mean, I can't even remember how many years 2P's been around now, but it's been a long, long time. I definitely remember working on bids at least 15 years ago where we were dealing with transfers of staff. But essentially, it protects people who were doing a job in the first place from immediately being sacked as the contract transfers to a new provider.
And it's a public sector element, isn't it? It's because it's a public sector contract.
It is in this context, yeah. I've just lost my train of thought there. I was just about to say something, which is completely gone now. No, it's gone. So I think in terms of where it applies, it comes back to you need a lawyer. Yeah. Because there are so many different scenarios where it may or may not apply. It is not a decision that I would take on your own because of the risks attached to it. So if you get it wrong, then it potentially destroys any margin in a contract. And there are all sorts of little games that people play around GP lists and stretching the truth in terms of who works on what contract. And we could talk about that for hours and hours about tactics within bids. But I think the second part of the question is, how do I account for it? I would always look at worst case scenario, what that means to the organisation and margin. Then I would look at probably what we think is the reality, and then I would look at an upside as well. So with all of this stuff, I'd be looking at those three different scenarios. So worst case, reality, upside, and an upside is like best case. So that would be that you may well know that there's a whole bunch of people that you don't want because you know them, and you know that they're not doing the job that you want them to do. And it may well be that quite often with a lot of contracts we work on, they can be those jobs can be done by different grades or staff with different qualifications. So in terms of accounting, I would always go with those three scenarios, and then it is for the board or whoever's signing off the financials to look at those three scenarios and see what the level of risk is to the organisation. And if that level of risk is too great, then there's a decision to be made on whether you bid for it or not. The upside's always great to look at, but really the main thing is what you think reality is. And if you're an organisation that's fairly experienced, you will know from other contracts, there might be a bit of a fluctuation. It might be, plus or minus a couple of percent here or there, or if there's a particularly specialist group of staff, they might have a bigger impact. But generally speaking, use those three scenarios and then get somebody with some commercial knowledge and operational knowledge to make a decision on whether you want to go for it or not.
Excellent. And just a quick note on the writing. If in some bids you will be asked to write an answer about what your 2P process is, either as a standalone question or within a workforce and or mobilisation question. So regardless of the finance elements, you also need to understand what the process is and how to go through it so that you can write about it.
And that is a prescribed process. So make sure you don't try and blag it. Make sure you understand what the process is, because to anyone that has been through it, that will stand out like a sore thumb.
Again, legal advice is required for the next element I will talk about is pension eligibility. Mm-hmm. That can get very complicated, particularly in the NHS and with specialist groups like doctors. Mm-hmm. So we won't go into the complexities of that at the moment, but pensions can be a very sticky element and you need to get the right advice for that.
Yeah. And all the other contractual things like annual leave. Yeah. Fine. Okay. Right. For fear of doing an hour on GP, hopefully that's answered the main question in sort of headline level. Maybe we should do something in a bit more detail on that another day.
I think we'll get a HR lawyer on a webinar or something in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Question 4. How important is win rate?
Depends on the context.
Yep. Probably very important, I would say, most of the time, because that is generally the thing that people are measured on. In reality, there's a whole load of other stuff that is important and supports the win rate. So I would say that's the headline. The first thing that we would generally ask when we're talking to a client for the first time is, what is your win rate? Because that gives us an indication of whether their bid process is working properly. So if they're winning 20% of bids, clearly there's an issue somewhere in the process, and it might be qualification, it might be quality of writing, it might be commercials. If their win rate's 80%, then they're probably doing okay and the process is okay. So just that one figure gives you an idea of what the organisation's like. But that is one figure, which is a little bit like a scoreline in a football match, rugby match, whatever it might be. It doesn't always explain how the game has gone. So, it could be a 1-1 draw, but there were 75 chances and one team was far better than the other. So I think you need to be careful about just looking at win rate as a single figure. It should be part of a set of business development metrics, which might be, 3 to 10 different metrics that explain how good your organisation is. Rob, I can see you're keen to come in there.
I'll do another football analogy. Okay. Let's take any old football team. They've got an amazing central defender, right? Okay. In this case, they'll be the bid writer. Amazing central defender. Well, if you don't have a striker, you're not going to win the match. So you could have the best bid writer, but if other elements of the organisation aren't firing in the right way, whatever that might be, if it's commercial, if it's delivery model, reputation, politics can come into it, then it doesn't matter how good your writing is. The same goes for the other elements. You might have the best value for money and innovation, but if the way you get that across on the page isn't right, then it doesn't matter. It's not going to get you the win.
Are you likening yourself to an Arsenal centre-back from the glory days, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, why not? I think I've got the look of Martin Keown, so who they used to call Gargoyle. So I'll go with that.
I was thinking more Tony Adams, but we'll move on.
Well, no, let's not go there. Anyway.
Okay. Right.
Move on.
Okay. So next question: do you have any advice on how to select a partner or subcontractor? Yes.
Move on.
This is an area that often eats up quite a lot of time during the bid process. So this is one of those things that we mentioned around doing pre-bid. The first thing, particularly for subcontractors, is a formal due diligence process. And that's often asked for in bids where you've got subcontractors working for you. So, are you looking at their financial stability? Are you looking at their social value, their ESG policies, their governance policies, their health and safety record, so that you're comfortable that you've selected a good quality subcontractor? Partners are slightly different in that it's, as it says there, it's more of a partnership than a subcontractual relationship. But again, I would say you still want a due diligence process to follow for partners. So with a subcontractor, as the name implies, it's more dictatorial in terms of the relationship. With a partner, it's probably more of an even split in terms of how you move things forward. All of this stuff, I mean, I would say probably we've negotiated partnerships and subcontracts within 2 or 3 days for bids, where everything's gone our way. But it can also take 6 months to a year to get these things sorted. So I think the first bit of advice was get it done early. Often in a bid, they will ask if there is a subcontract in place or a heads of terms or some sort of formal agreement that's signed by both parties. It always looks better if that agreement exists, rather than saying we'll sort it out in mobilisation. So get it done early. The second is follow a due diligence process. And the third then is invest time in that relationship, whether it's a partner or subcontractor. We've seen lots of relationship breakdowns, particularly with subcontractors, where it's quite a punitive relationship. So there's no kind of guidance or leadership from the lead contractor. But when things go wrong, they hit the subcontractor over the head repeatedly and impose fines and
Literally?
penalties. Yeah, well, yeah, quite often. That's a health and safety issue, though. So I think those are my three things: is get it done early, due diligence, and invest time in the relationship.
Just I'll go a step before that. Is for any partner or subcontract, why do you need it, and what value do they add? So if it might be quite simply they do something that you don't, that you need to have to do the bid and have some credibility. That's a simple thing. It may be reputational. It may be that they see something better than you. It may be innovation. It could be just whatever it is. Don't do it for the sake of, oh, we've got a partner on board, so we all look nice and fluffy. Have a point to what it is, and a very clear direction of travel with that partner and subcontractor. So you're very clear on who's doing what, why they're involved, and very importantly, what you will actually deliver with them down the line. Because it's one thing going through a bid process with a partner or subcontractor. It's very different to then actually having to deliver with them across a 3, 5, 7, 10-year contract.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Rob. And that's initially I was thinking maybe that forms part of the due diligence, but actually it's a pre-selection piece of work. I think. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to our last question, which is probably straight for you. I am the only bid writer and have to write bids on my own. Yes, I think we've both been there and felt the pain of that. Do you have any tips for me?
Give me a call. No. I think to write bids on your own, if you have to do it on your own, you need a lot of discipline. We've talked about project management before. If you do have a project manager above you, that's great. Have a great working relationship with them and follow their process. If you're having to set out your own process, look at work backwards from the deadline, backwards from any milestones. Understand what you can do within the time that you have. Is that writing a certain amount of words per day? Is that getting all your planning done in a couple of days and your draft done by X? Whatever works for you. And Matt, you talked about discipline earlier as well. You have to be really disciplined. I know some people thrive, the day before a deadline and can stay up all night and write things, but you're not going to get the quality doing that. I don't think so anyway. It's never worked for me. So plan it out very carefully, understand your limitations and what you can do. Ideally, you want a peer involved to keep you sane as well. Now, whether ideally that's somebody within your organisation, so you don't have to have worries about breaching any commercial confidence, but you need somebody to talk to and be able to talk things through. So going back to the actual question, my main tip is, even if you're doing it on your own, make sure there's somebody you can talk to and talk things through with.
I think not being a bid writer, but my kind of outside of the profession tips would be try and create as good a bid library as you can to work from. The second would be if you can get an agreed delivery model or product list, that will really help. The third would be right to the spec in absence of anything else. Because at least then you will have a compliant bid. And that's often one of the things that Rob keeps saying when we're writing bids is, at draft 2, it's now compliant with the spec. And then draft 3, we do all the extra bits and pieces and add the glitter and sparkles. But that's one of the things I think is a minimum that you should get to, is a compliant bid that delivers the specification. And then I think outside of that, and Rob said it as a kind of bit of a joke, but talk to other people if you can. We do give out a small amount of free advice every year. Obviously, we can't do it for everybody, but we do help people where we think they're really up against it. So, if you've got anybody like that, or sometimes just getting a different perspective on it from someone who doesn't even write bids, and quite often that's really useful, is, do you understand what I'm saying, having nothing to do with this bid process? And if the answer is no, then that's quite helpful feedback. I think we could probably both go on about this for ages because we've both been there and done it, and it is a very difficult position to be in. But hopefully that's been helpful. And as Rob said, if you are struggling, give Rob a shout. Right. On that happy note, I think we have dealt with all the questions bang on time today. So the next Q&A, I know, it's a miracle. The next Q&A episode will be the 18th September. Next week, we'll be back with the Bid Breakfast bio with a special guest. So thank you for joining us today. Hopefully that's been a useful half hour for you, and we will see you next time.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone.